Hey everyone, we're here for another episode of the Ratitude Podcast. And I think every episode I start out with, I'm really excited about our guests that we're having on today. And it's always true, but until this time, I think I have known every single guest. I mean, pretty well. I've been friends with them, except today I've got someone that he's just a new friend. We just met a few days ago online. He's from Perth, Australia. His name is Mark Bentley. And I really am excited because he is a gene codes expert. I'm going to call you that. Whether you are or not, I'm calling you that. And it's so fascinating that he showed up because I have just started a study of the gene codes. And I've just started this with the first process called the activation sequence. I started it last night. And Mark is teaching this in February. And I don't know where this is going to go, but I know that it was meant to be. I was meant to meet Mark from Perth, Australia. He's at 9 p.m. I'm at 8 a.m. So it worked out. And I'm so excited to welcome you, Mark, to the Ratitude Podcast.
Hey, Robert. Well, I want to say thank you so much for the invitation. When you reached out on LinkedIn, it was a real delight. And I've been watching your podcast and checking it out, and you've got some amazing guests. So I'm really, really honored to be here.
Well, cool. So tell us a little bit about you. You're in Perth, Australia. What are you doing there? What do you have a funny accent? How do people tell? How do people tell an accent, whether it's from South Africa, Australia, or the UK? Don't answer that, but I don't know.
I'll get in trouble even trying to answer that. But yeah, it's common. Canada, Australia. It all kind of blends in around there.
Yeah.
I think England might have something to do with that.
Yeah. What's your background? What did you grow up with? Who are you? What did you become?
So that's a big question, Robert. And but the nutshell answer is I grew up here in Perth, Western Australia, very curious. And my parents were never religious or anything like that, but they gave me and my brothers a lot of freedom to really ask questions and explore for ourselves. And so from quite a young age, I was questioning the reality of everything. And I had visions of being on a stage, and I didn't really know what that meant back in the day. So when I was young, I thought I was going to be an actor, a performer. And so my first 25, 30 years was actually spent traveling around the world, spent a lot of time living in Norway, where I actually ran off with the circus and did circus training, ended up starting my own company. I was running bars and nightclubs, and really, in hindsight, what I realized I was doing was honing the art of my amateur psychologist skills, because I had a fascination with what makes people tick. And so that's what kind of got me started. And it was around 28 that I became a dad at a festival, very unplanned. And that took me on the journey of really going deeper into the work. And that's what led me to the Gene Keys.
It led you to the Gene Keys. So what are the Gene Keys?
So the Gene Keys are, the way I like to think of it, Robert, is the Gene Keys are literally like a set of keys, right? There's 64 different keys to our DNA. And if you look at our DNA, there are 64 codons in our DNA. So what the Gene Keys essentially is a synthesis of ancient wisdom. And we're talking about the I Ching, the ancient Chinese oracle system. That's been around for like 5,000 years. Where we discovered that the way that was built was in doublets and triplets in the same way that DNA is essentially programmed with its codons. So what Gene Keys is the byproduct of all of these wisdom streams coming together with modern science to really realize that for a long time, we've had the map to our genome, to our DNA. And within our DNA lies all 64 victim patterns of humanity, but also all 64 gifts of humanity that we have here. So the Gene Keys is kind of the map and the compass to exploring your inner world and unlocking your highest potential, really, and service to the world.
Yeah. So the first thing that I did that free hologenic profile and looked at it and go, I can't figure this thing out. And then I just posted it on Facebook, and a bunch of friends all popped in and said, oh, this is so cool. It takes like a year's worth of study and blah, 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 blah. And I go, that's not the way I work. I speed read through a lot of the books that I read, but I started thinking about it going like, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for me to slow down and really study this. And that's what I've decided to do. And so could you talk a little bit about, the process, the study.
So I really like that you have already made that breakthrough, Robert. So I would say that we often refer to the gene keys as a living transmission. We often enter into it thinking it's like astrology or like a lot of these other systems where we come at it with a very analytical mindset. Whereas the reason we call them keys, because the process is activated through contemplation. So the Gene Keys is not so much something that you can study. You can read the Gene Keys book over here. It's a big book. You can read that, back front to cover 100 times.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, good to see you've got it. You could read that back to front, back to front. But the real magic begins to happen when you take those keys into your everyday life and use the process of contemplation, which is about slowing down. It's about taking this into the busyness of your life, into your relationships, into the challenges. And so, again, the reason we call them keys is when you hold one. So in this virtual retreat that we're running coming up in February, it's a 4-month deep dive into this activation sequence, which is the beginning of the process, a sequence. You will work with your life's work key. That's where it all begins, the sphere of life's work. So people, you can download your profile. I'm sure we'll have a link here by the time this comes out. And you'll see that one sphere holds the key to understanding and unlocking your highest potential for what you are here to do in the world. And so the idea of contemplation is the metaphor that really works for me, Robert, is thinking of it like, when you get a key that doesn't quite work in a lock properly, like an old lock, and you got to kind of jiggle it. And sometimes you got to like, right? And you got to like pull it back a little, pull it in, jiggle it. And then eventually you get it, right? That's contemplation. You take one of these keys, you take this mystery of your life's work that makes no sense when you first see it. You might get a little bit of an insight. And then what you do is you hold it. And you go into your day and you try and hold back from rushing along and just see, what does this mean? Where does it turn up in my life? What is this word, this keyword that's here? You can look in the dictionary, look at the etymology. Where did the word come from? And how does that relate to what I'm here to do in the world? And how does it relate to what I am doing in the world right now? Maybe the shadow frequency is really turning up. And so what happens is, as you hold it and kind of sit with that key, we call it a living transmission because it begins to show itself to you. So we aren't really teachers. I'm a Gene Keys ambassador and a guide, and I've been doing this work for over 10 years. But we don't really teach. We facilitate. We hold space. And we're kind of guides to help show the way to get started and the techniques. But the real teacher is the transmission itself. And that, to be honest, Rob, is why after a lifetime of exploring all the different modalities and possibilities, I dedicated my life to sharing the Gene Keys work, was because it was the most dogma-free, open transmission that really gave the power to you to find the wisdom for yourself that is already in your DNA.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, Mark, because when it was first suggested to me, I'm working with the spiritual guide, and she told me, get this Gene Key thing and study it. And I got the book and started reading and go, this, I don't understand this at all. And then I did the free profile, looked at it, didn't understand it at all again. And I thought it was, like you said, just like astrology. They ask for your birth date and time and your location. I've given that for for astrology, and I've gotten all sorts of reports, and some of it makes sense and some of it doesn't. But it's sort of, the way I look at it, it's kind of prescriptive. And here's who you are. And then you read it, and I think it's almost kind of, for some people, hypnotic, in that if it says that you are a great lover, that you become a great lover. It says you're a bad lover, you're going to become a bad lover. It's almost dictating to you what you're going to do. And so I've been like resistant to this. But as I read through the introduction to the Gene Keys, you use the word living transmission. And what I got out of that was this idea of contemplation, which I'm in a contemplative phase in my life. I go walk the beach for hours every day now, just thinking about stuff in this contemplation place. And it's so interesting because both my kids, they started out in normal universities, called normal, and somehow they both migrated to this Buddhist university after 2 or 3 or 4 years, each of them, and started over at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. and they ended up majoring in contemplative psychology. And I couldn't say the word even for a long time because I knew it started with a C, and I was thinking clinical psychology. No, they didn't tell me that. It took me a while to get this word contemplation, and then it hit me in this Gene Keys now is that this is another really fascinating thing. And as you've described it, I didn't even know that they were keys. I just kind of Gene Keys. It hadn't even resonated to me that it could be a key, and that you're looking at this and you're contemplating on the words that it's saying to you, it's suggesting to you, and then you go contemplate on it, and stuff is going to happen inside of you. You're going to get transmissions. You're going to be in a meditative state, and something's going to happen, and you're going to change your life. That excited me. Is that what's happening here in the Gene Keys?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've summarized it so well, Robert. And I love what you say about your sons. Like that, my heart was just jumping out hearing that. Just to hear that's even something that's being offered, over there. And Boulder, Colorado is a place where you will see the Gene Keys swims around a lot. And Richard Rudd's going there, the founder and author of the Gene Keys. I think he's heading there in September.
Oh, really? Well, I'm going to have to check into that because now all of a sudden I'm kind of all in on this, going like, oh, this is it, because I'm on this spiritual path now. I got the spiritual guide. I got all sorts of guides helping me, and they're telling me Gene Keys, meditation. I need to go on silent retreats. I need to go on meditative retreats. I need to meditate every day. I'm an engineer. I'm a chemical engineer. This is weird stuff for me.
I love it.
Just this next phase of life is going to be really interesting. And I'm really excited about it. So tell me, you discovered the Gene Keys in what year did you say?
I'd say it'd be about 10 years ago. I became a dad when I was 28, which was 2010. So probably around 2012.
Okay, so how did you discover it, and what did you do right? Did you go, oh, this is it, I need to start studying this, or did it take a while? What was your process?
Yeah, so my process finding it was deeply synchronistic. And my life has been very much around study of synchronicity. Like that's been the passion for me since I was a child, and watching these magical patterns that would happen. And I actually rebelled against growing up. I had an intellectual mind that everyone wanted me to study and become a lawyer or something like this. But everywhere I looked, I saw these blocks and locks, and I thought, oh, that doesn't feel right. And so my life has been very much just following the signs of synchronicity. And that led me to a work. I went with a lady called Luna Joy. She's what she would call herself a spiritual archaeologist. And I was working on the mine sites here in Australia doing construction. And I saw this, and she talked about a vision of someone juggling clubs in the middle of the Andes at the sacred sites in Machu Picchu. And so that was the aha that I needed it's time to pursue my spirituality deeper. And because I was on the mine sites, I had the money to do a travel. I was performing around the place a bit, got to Peru. And while I was in Peru, it was a dear friend, Ashani and Ishram, this couple that I met on the trip, that introduced me to the Mayan dream spell count. So it actually all began with the Mayan wisdom stream, which I then came to understand was all about studying time and synchronicity and how that all works. So that became my study for many years. And then it was, interestingly, the group was called the Law of Time Foundation. And I was at one of their gatherings over in Victoria in Australia. And I was talking to Ashani, and she handed me this book, the book that you've got over there. She handed me the Gene Keys. I'd never seen it in my life. And she said, Mark, I think you'll enjoy this. And when she handed it to me, I looked at it, and then I opened it. And the first thing I saw was a acknowledgement, an image credit to the Law of Time Foundation from Richard Rudd at the Gene Keys. So now there's this connection that was happening, and Ashani, who handed it to me, hadn't seen that. So she wasn't even aware of that. And so when I saw this, I thought, okay, something's going on. I wrote an email straight away to Richard Rudd, who I just discovered in that moment. And I said, what's the connection here? And he said, there isn't one. We just really liked the image of the I Ching that they used and asked for permission. And so it was just this pure synchronicity that tied it together and got my attention. And it was at that point that I actually ordered the book, got my profile. The courses were very basic back then. And honestly, Robert, I became like a mad scientist, which is kind of how I work. When something triggers in me, then it's just all in. And if I had hair, it would have been all over the place. And, the codes were flying, the insights, the epiphanies. And it was something that just spoke to me so much that the words in the book were mind-blowing enough, but it was the experiences, like you were saying, that were happening inside my body that made me kind of start going, wow, there's something here.
So then what happened?
So from there, I continued the work. And at this point, when my son was around 4 years old, the circumstances and situation, his mother and I were not together. We tried for about a year, but it was a very challenging situation in the first place. And so after we separated, when he was about 4 years old, the situation changed and I ended up needing to take him full-time. So I became a full-time single father. And I was a deep fan of the law of attraction, Abraham Hicks and Bashar, Darrell Anker, and the channelings. And so I'd done a lot of exploration of these things. And I saw some of your guests talking about it, which made me realize I'm going to love being on this podcast.
Yeah.
But what that did, Robert, was suddenly it was like the God said, well, it's all good to talk about these spiritual concepts, but now you need to walk it. And so suddenly I became a stay-at-home single mother, needing to work out how was I going to run a life, my business, my purpose as a man in my own drive that I had before this situation, while also being a mother and supportive and nurturer to my child as well, while also supporting everyone involved in the situation. And so this tested me to no end. It stretched me in so many ways. And what really began to happen was I was able to use the Gene Keys work to unravel my wounding that was being basically poked and provoked in these situations. I was able to really see where I was playing the victim, the oppressed, victim in this circumstance. And over the years, it was a journey. And over the years, I had to learn how to walk my talk and take it beyond just spiritual concepts. And really, what does it mean to live by the law of attraction in an everyday life? And the Gene Keys profile proved itself to me through my actual life experience. And I had to face, the death of a dear friend. I had to face all these things that were just brutal. And what I came out the other side was with a kind of romance for life, for all of this challenge. Like I think back on all these moments and now I think back on them with a fondness, with a kind of gratitude, like how goddamn lucky I am for the pain, for the struggle that allowed me to become who I am today. And it was the Gene Keys that gave me that framework to be able to shift my perspective out of the victim mindset. And so that then led me, I think it was around 2018, 17, it's all a blur at the moment, Robert. But around then, Richard did a calling for Gene Keys ambassadors, people that felt the calling to dedicate their life to sharing this work. And it was an immediate yes from me after all that. And so I did the training with Richard and with the amazing community we had. And since then, I've been sharing the work. I do one-on-one sessions for people. I personally am more of I tried the traditional coaching, Robert, but I found that wasn't really my style. I was more the kind of Gandalf to your hero's journey. When you feel stuck, that's when you can call on me. And I'm more of a breakthrough coach in that sense. And so I've been working one-on-one with clients. We do the virtual retreats. So I work together with Gene Keys Publishing, Richard Rudd and the team. And as an ambassador, we lead those retreats together with a bunch of the hosts and guides. And yeah, so that's kind of what brings us to today.
Yeah. So I just started last night. I went to the Gene Keys website and I signed up for the activation sequence training. Someone who saw my post on Facebook said, start with the activation sequence. So I go, okay, I don't know. I just started with that. And so I paid my money. I started it and it's actually very sophisticated. To me, it's very complicated. And I started listening to videos and then going down and then clicking on links and it would take me somewhere. And I go, someone has really put a lot of effort and time into this because this is magical. I got lost in it. And then I started kind of beating myself up going like, I'm not doing it right. There's got to be, I need to go in the right order. And then I go, no, that's exactly wrong. Because in fact, in the introduction, it says, don't worry about it. You can go in any order you want. And again, my engineering mind kind of popped in, go, there's got to be a linear way to do this. And then I go, nope, that's not it. Is there some suggestions you have for someone that might be listening in our audience and all of a sudden they just get motivated because they see you and I together. They see my energy around. They see your energy around. Go, okay, I got to try this too. What would you recommend to someone that's just discovering the gene keys, either from us or from someone else, and wants to try it or pursue it? What would be a good path for that person?
Good question, Robert. Good question. And I just want to say, what beautiful timing to have this conversation with you. It's all the ambassadors have different kind of, specialities, passions, knacks on, because there's so much in the Gene Keys transmission. It's your profile is one piece, but there is so much more in there to be explored as you go deeper.
Yes.
And for me, one of my passions is the activation, is the beginning. And it can get boring for some, but for me, I can go over it again and again because there's something special about when someone first comes in. So I'm beyond honored and stoked, Robert, to be able to have this conversation with you. I would say the tips for people when they first begin. I mean, you just covered it beautifully, that there will be that feeling of overwhelm because we're so brought up in this kind of education system of the idea that there's a target to hit. You do your work and you get your target and you fill out the right answers. But in the Gene Keys work, there are no answers. There's questions. And, some great teachers, spiritual teachers have often said it's not about the answers. If you find the right question for a person, that can trigger enlightenment. And really, the Gene Keys is about provoking the right questions. So it is about really relaxing, allowing the confusion to be okay. That's cool. Of course you're confused. It's your first step in, allow that to be okay and enjoy it. Revel in it a little bit. You got all the time in the world to work out the order and make sense of it. And the first step, obviously, is getting your free profile, which you've already talked about. And in that free profile is 4 paragraphs. Your life's work, evolution, radiance, and purpose. And those paragraphs are a kind of shortcut into getting a feeling for what your life's work is about, the keywords and the meanings. Now, they are generic paragraphs, but I find them so magical still that they often land pretty hard home. So that's kind of the starting point. The activation sequence is the first course. Now, we call them sequences, Robert, because one of the, I often think in metaphor and analogies and work in that way. And the reason they're called sequences is, you remember the old movies of back in the old days of James Bond movies when they're cracking a safe and they've got their little stethoscope and they've got it on and they're twisting the dial, right? And they're listening for that click and then they go the other way, click. So really that's what we talk about. When we say activation sequence, it's the sequence to contemplate in a certain order in order to trigger your activation. And you'll feel it in your body. You'll have breakthrough moments when you get it. And it may take a while to get some. It may happen quick. It may go slow. And you can rush past it and rush through. That's okay. You'll come back in time. And everyone has their way. And so that's the idea, is you contemplate the activation sequence, which is all about physical embodiment. It's about purpose and meaning for why you are here in the world. And then you have the red spheres. So the activation is the green ones. And then for those looking at their profile, and hey, pause and click that and get your profile right now so you can follow along and then press play again. That's what it looks like exactly. Those red spheres, Robert, that go through the middle, that's called the Venus sequence. And those red spheres are all about essentially how you are set up to relate with the world around you, how you're set up to make love with the world around you. And I love the way you said, if you were, astrology says you're a good lover, you'll be a good lover. The Venus sequence is, what kind of lover are you here to be? Because if you try to be like everyone else, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to feel like a failure. And the Gene Keys is really about helping you discover what is your unique way of being a lover in this world. And one of the ones you might appreciate is the sphere of attraction. The sphere of attraction, it's a sexy one. It's about sex. It's about sexuality. But sexuality is creativity. We are constantly making love to the world and creating. You and I are creating friction with our conversation that creates birth to new things. And that's what the sphere of attraction is. What is the essence you bring into your interactions with the world? And if you mix that with the law of attraction teachings, it becomes a powerhouse. To me, it was almost like a missing piece of the law of attraction that helps kind of really refine it. So the IQ, the EQ in your profile, that's your triggers, your emotional triggers. You'll find most of the emotional reactions in your behaviors in relationships, business partnerships, etc., you'll find the keys between these two. And as you contemplate them, it begins to kind of let those bodyguards, your shadow frequencies are like your defense mechanisms. They're like your bodyguards protecting your heart. And when you start getting to know them, you can start saying, hey, thank you for protecting me. I'm okay at the moment. The science of epigenetics, when we shift our perception of our environment, our defense mechanisms relax, and suddenly you can deepen your relationships even further. So that's the Venus sequence. It's about an emotional journey to opening your heart, which then leads us to the blue spheres, which is called the Pearl sequence. And the Pearl sequence is about prosperity. And it's actually working on the mental plane. And it's about activating a future form of prosperity that is coming into the world right now. I mean, you've seen it, Robert. The world is collapsing on one level, but as it does, it gives space for us to rebuild and give birth to what you see in that Pearl sequence. And people often think, oh, well, can I do the Pearl sequence first? Because I need to make some money. And then can I do the activation? The real trick here is, in order for the Pearl sequence to really make sense and open up in your life, you need an open heart. And to open your heart, we need to heal our wounding and emotional wounding. And in order to be able to do that Venus sequence and really heal our emotional wounding, we need strong core stability in our body. And that's the activation sequence. So that's why we begin there. We set the activation sequence, develop that core stability so that we can handle the emotional process that we go through then. And so the last tip I would give, Robert, is if you have the capacity, join us on one of the virtual retreats. That's literally why we have them. They go over 4 months, and we understand that it can be tricky when you first begin, and especially pacing yourself. So the invitation is to consider any of the deep dive virtual retreats. The activation sequence is 4 months, and it will pace it out for you. You get Q&A webinars where myself and some of the other hosts will be there to answer your questions. It's an amazing community where you get to come together and share the journey.
When does that start, your activation sequence?
So this one is beginning on the 12th of February. So it may have started before this one comes out. We will have them coming through the year. So again, you can get started, do the activation sequence course, self-guided. There's lots of Gene Keys guides out there that if you get stuck and need some support, you can book a session. But basically, you can get started on your own. And then when a retreat comes along, then jump on. We often refer to them as like cruise ships, because even though they're virtual, it's like you have a team come together of synchronistically gathered people from around the world doing this deep, powerful work to step into purpose. And so whenever it is, people often say this. If you ever hear someone, Robert, say, I've done the Gene Keys or I've finished the Gene Keys, then they haven't even started, because the Gene Keys is something that cannot be done. It is an ongoing process. And what I found after 10 plus years, I go back to this activation again and again and again. And every single time I go through these rounds, it just opens up more and more exquisitely inside me.
Oh, very cool. I got even more excited when you say how it's complementary to the law of attraction, because that's what I've been into like the last almost full year. In fact, I'm going on another Abraham Hicks 11-day event on March 11th, and that will be my fourth one in a year. And when I go on my long beach walks here in Florida on the white sand, and I've been going for 2.5. The day before I went for 4 hours. For at least half of it, I'm listening to Abraham Hicks with Law of Attraction, and it's just so resonating to me. So the fact that you say the Gene Keys, which I don't really know exactly what is yet, that it's a good complement to it, makes me even more excited.
That's awesome, Robert. And I'm a little envious, I have to say. Those cruises are always so far away from here. And my brother and I are very deeply passionate with Abraham work for like 20 years, I think. We've been listening and tuning in, and it helped me through so many hard times. The Vortex meditation CD that she has was amazing. And I look forward to being on one of those cruises. And hopefully one day we'll be on the same one. The synchronicity will line it up. That'd be pretty magic.
Last year, the year before, there was one in New Zealand, Australia. A friend of mine was on it.
Yeah.
But there isn't one this year. Anyway, so I have another friend of mine that saw that I'm in the Gene Keys. She sent me a video of Richard Rudd. And today it seemed like it's a weekly webinar or podcast or whatever. It was, I think, 17 minutes. And this one was on codependency. And I asked the
Yes.
question, are you studying the gene keys? And she said, I'm not sure what you mean. I get once a week a video and I listen to it and it's really brilliant and it resonates for me. But she didn't even know about the profile and didn't know about the sequences. Just once a week listens to Richard Rudd.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so funny, Robert, to hear, because obviously I'm deeply immersed in the work.
Yeah.
And the community, etc. So it's so amazing to hear how it's rolling out in the world and the different parts people are finding. And so that's essentially the sun as it is transiting through these different astrological positions. Each gene key is related to certain parts of the astrological alignments. So as the sun moves, every about 6 days, it moves into another gene key. And then there's these different, what we call lines, which are like flavors of that gene key. And so, we've just had the 19th gene key, which is all about the gift of sensitivity, the shadow of codependence. And it's a juicy one.
It is.
So this, right?
Yeah.
And so those emails are well worth signing up to. And the audio is free while it is in the transit. And then it goes back to, it costs a couple of dollars per clip, but they're free during the transit time.
I gotcha.
And so when the sun is shining, one way of kind of visualizing it is it's like a lens. Like, for example, we've just had the 19th gene key. It's got the 19th flavor in it, right? And the sun is shining and all the neutrinos of the sun are picking up that essence and bringing it down and impacting us on the planet. And so I think we're going to see a lot more science around astrology coming out, and the engineer mind of yours will be able to really have a field day with it, because there is science to it as far as I'm concerned. And what's happening is that sun is bringing and shining that essence into our everyday life for all of us. So no matter what your profile is, when the 19 was shining, we're all under the 19. And as each key changes, we're all kind of, and you can think of it in a way as an evolutionary mechanism, that like a time release program that's kind of moving through and getting us to, and you'll see it in the news. You'll see it in all the craziness out there, these themes, if you kind of know how to look.
So even if you didn't want to spend the money or the time on going through the whole year-long program or however long it takes, the sequences, the activation, the Venus, and then what's the Pearl?
The Pearl.
And you just sign up for the free week, every 6 days or so video, and you contemplate on that, there seems like there would be growth that way too.
Absolutely. 100%. It's
so fascinating. Now, one of my challenges is actually doubt. Okay. So when I think about astrology and the sun and the moon, and that someone can take a time you were born, a day you were born. Unfortunately, I know this from my mom. And then all of a sudden this profile pops up and it means this is you. I have doubt around that because, to me, some person, a human, somehow just made it up. They just made it up. And they wrote a book on it, and the best ones made a bunch of money on it, and then they get ambassadors and they make a bunch of money off that. And I really, that's one of my biggest challenges. And I recognize that because part of my journey is I want to have some mystical experiences that in my Joe Dispenza world, in my Abraham Hicks world, and even in the Tony Robbins world, people are having all these magical experiences, and I close my eyes and do whatever, and I'm not having magical experiences. Now, life is getting better and better, but these mystical experiences, these spiritual experiences, I think I'm blocked from doing that because of doubt. So how do you address doubt? I'm let's just role play. I'm a chemical engineer going like, no, this is a bunch of BS. How would you address someone like me or my past me?
Absolutely. I mean, look, it's a fair question, Rob. I think it's important as well to really acknowledge and appreciate that engineer aspect of that you carry and that humanity has. The left brain has a place in service and has been an amazing thing to keep this world safe, And there is a lot of things out there that you really don't want to go running down the street following and everything it says. And again, this is where, for me, the beauty with the gene keys is, from my experience, you could have the completely wrong birthday. And people might not love hearing this, but you could have the completely wrong profile. And the very act of contemplation and self-inquiry will still get you there. Because you have all 64 gene keys in your DNA. The profile is just a set of keys and sequences that are specifically resonant with your way of being according to the way when you were born, and your vehicle, in a sense. A bit like when you have your little beeper for your cars, you want to unlock your car and go beep beep, right? It's a certain frequency that matches the car and unlocks it. And so in that sense, it's like that's your little beeper in the gene keys, but you've got all the keys. And there's a million roads to Rome, right? It's all about the journey, not the tools. And so one of the things I think people can make a mistake with systems like gene keys or things like this, is they can become very dogmatic, very kind of stuck, and very like, this is truth. And it's like, it doesn't need to be. It might be, but maybe it's not. And one of the greatest things that liberated me, Robert, into living the more mystical, romantic life that I get to live now, because I come from having a very analytical mind and a skeptical mind. And I think healthy skepticism is great. It says, I don't know. And I think we should be always skeptical, because how do we know? How do I know that I'm even talking to you right now, Robert? How do I know that I'm even actually me in a human experience right now and not in a matrix tub, driven by robots? How do I know anything for sure? And the more that I found that I think I know things, the more restricted my world became and the more deaf I became to the mystical experience. Yet paradoxically, the more that I let go of needing to know anything for sure, and really just going, okay, how does this feel? Does this feel good for me? Does it give me joy? And be curious. So to me, curiosity is the key. If you are a good scientist, then you should explore it with an open mind, healthy skepticism, and curiosity, and see what happens. And that's probably where I'd say that.
Yeah, I love the word curiosity. As I was approaching 2024, someone posted something about what's your word for the year? What's your focus for the year? And curiosity was the word that popped up for me. And so that's been my pursuit. But it was interesting as you were speaking, you said something that reminded me that I guess one of the things that I've learned is the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know. But you said it kind of a little bit differently, in that the more you let go, the more you learn. Is that what you said? Do you remember?
People often ask me to repeat myself, Robert, and I've actually got the 43rd gene key in my purpose, and it's the shadow of deafness, the gift of insight, and the city of epiphany. So kind of my purpose in the world is to kind of be the channel of these epiphanies. So often I'm fresh listening to it myself. But it's essentially the more we let go of needing to know, the more it opens the capacity for us to discover.
That's it. That's what it was. And I was thinking about that because I'm not sure that that's what I'm doing. Well, I'm kind of letting go, but I'm letting go in order to figure this out, in order to learn. And what I think I heard from you is that there's a subtleness, maybe that would be helpful to me, is a letting go of needing to know and just completely letting go. And then I go, well, what do I do with that? Because I really want to know.
Well, this is that unconditional thing, right? We talk about unconditional love, unconditional. It's like entering into the process with curiosity, unconditional. That in the end, you can or you can't. Like, what is it in the old Star Wars Yoda? Do not try. Just do it. Be it. It's that thing of, we can get this idea that, and again, as part of, I believe, our education in the world, the way we're kind of conditioned, very left brain. And I think that was important for the times we've come from, but it no longer serves us in the times we're moving into. And to me, when people talk about masculine, feminine, they talk about the rise of the feminine leading. To me, this is not about men and women. This is about the feminine aspects of humanity is to lead the way forwards. And that means intuition. It means imagination, curiosity. It's that openness to receptivity of the divine to allow us to feel, the inspiration of the gods. And then the masculine is here to then execute that, bring it into the world and explore it in scientific method to then bring it into its being. And so we've been living in a world that has been very lead with logic. But the problem is leading with logic is actually incredibly inefficient. It's the opposite of what we've been trained. That when you learn to lead with intuition or that feminine receptivity is able to bypass so much noise and inefficient pathways that the logic insists on going down, that it's like a sacred efficiency, right? It's able to actually get us where we're going faster. That's synchronicity, paying attention. Like the fact that you and I are sitting here now, if you want any other affirmation, Robert, that this is work that is inviting you, that there is a transmission wanting to work with you, it's the ease and grace that you and I have connected at the perfect timing right now. There's a piece of evidence for you that you can take with your engineering mind, put into the box of evidence, and continue to be curious and see what else turns up.
Yeah. So, Mark, what's next for you? What's next for you in your development?
That's an interesting question, Robert. It's so at the moment I have a new website being done. Actually, just had a meeting with the developer earlier today, and she's getting that ready. And so I really want to get my sessions going in a certain direction. I'm feeling really called to work with people that are in positions, because in a way there are people. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of access to power, but they're not quite sure how to handle it and what to do with it. And so I'm looking forward to being able to work with those people to help them come back into their heart center, because in a way, I feel like that's where I can make my most impact, where I can actually help support those who can make great change in the world, really hone in their integrity and their joy in doing so. So that's one side. I'll continue to be doing the Gene Keys retreats, working with Richard and the team and getting this work out there in every way possible. But the other sides of my life is I also work with frequency technology, where we have a wearable frequency tech that I love getting out there to help people support their stress, anxiety, that side of things. But what I'm really excited about, Robert, and it's the last piece of my puzzle once I get these other bits into place, is I'm a big tech head. I love technology. When I was young, I was like a 4-year-old teaching my mum how to put a cassette tape in a Commodore 64 and, the old computers. And so I really see an amazing potential for things like blockchain technology to liberate the creative spirit in the world. And I feel like it's the missing piece of the puzzle, and a lot of people don't understand it and are resistant to it, understandably. I think AI and all these technologies can be of service, and they can also cause problems, just like fire, the original technology, right? And so my passion, one of my greatest passions, is to take all of this work and start actually creating virtual worlds that can give these creative, amazing epiphanies and experiences for everyone, not just those that have the money to travel to Machu Picchu or have the money, but to make it accessible and bring in, binaural frequencies and all these kind of amazing support mechanisms. And I also, you see this tattoo on my wrist here. It was done about 3 years ago, and it represents a blockchain, a decentralized social blockchain, DeSo. It's something that I've been working with for 3 years as one of the big users on there and with the teams that are on there. And it's actually a way of being able to decentralize the creative economy so that we can actually start, for example, you could have your podcast on there and you own your content and no app owns it. So Facebook doesn't own it. Instagram will no longer own it. But rather it gets put on the chain where the apps all can access it. It's open to everyone and everyone can decide what they display and how they display it. So imagine that your podcast is now automatically available across all the platforms. And on top of it, people can then actually tip you with diamonds, flick you a penny, flick you 5 cents, flick you $1, if they like your work. And it just takes out the middleman of all of this work. And we can actually start liberating the human creative spirit. So that is kind of where I'm going.
Okay. So that is all really cool. But I think what I meant was, what are you doing? Where are you going next inside, internally, inward?
Well, internally, I don't really speak about this too often or say this out loud, but I would say what comes up for me is that I have little hints. I don't know where I'm going, Robert, in that sense. In the bigger picture, I don't know. I'm always just constantly discovering myself each day, again and again. Whatever turns up outwardly reflects it back inwardly. And the things I just mentioned, they're the adventures that I'm going on to really discover more and more about me. But I feel that if I was to say where my direction was heading, it's probably in the pathway of the ecstatics, which is really, this concept of losing one's mind and fully moving deeper and deeper into the human experience in that sense. So many talk about, ascension, leaving the human experience, becoming enlightened, etc., and transcending. For me, there's a real draw to how deep can I feel? How fully can I be in this experience? And that's what I feel so many of the great ecstatics of our past left this trail of breadcrumbs in their poetry, their music, their writings. And for me, I feel almost that I have a responsibility for my son until he is of an age that he can be fully autonomous in his own process. And after that, that's where I feel like my journey inward is going to take a more mystical path that I can't really say where it will go from there.
Wow, that was a beautiful answer, Mark. It has been such a pleasure having you here. I want to listen to this podcast over and over again because I am fired up. And I'm going to reach out to you and see what else you're doing. I think I'm going to sign up for your activation sequence if the time works out. I'm here in Florida and you're in Perth, so it might be at a weird time, but I'm going to try to see if I can make that work.
We got all the times covered, Robert. We've got an amazing hosting team all around. I'll be running morning and evenings, and we'll make sure that everyone's covered. We're a very global team.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for being here. Is there any final words, anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? You get the final word.
Well, it's an absolute blessing. Well, first, I just want to say, Robert, I'm really honored to be here and really blessed. And thank you to all of your audience that have tuned in. Any effort in sharing this love out there, it means the world to me, getting this work out there. And Robert, my final words really are just to say thank you to you. I watched your podcast after you reached out to me, and I love your energy. I love the spirit. I love your curiosity. The fact that you're an engineer pushing that boundary of comfort in hang on, and still being there and still doing the work, because that's what changes this world and makes it a better place. So thank you for everything you're doing. Really appreciate it.
All right, Mark. Have a beautiful day, or you're going to sleep pretty soon, although you said you're a night owl. Have a good rest of whatever phase of the day you are. And thank you coming here from Perth, Australia, Mark Bentley.